Okay, so yesterday we did the multiplying integers on a number line. Today we're going to do it with counters, and we're going to breeze through this pretty quick because at this point I feel like you don't even need the models. You guys would probably be just fine with the rules and carrying on. But it's good for you to see why it works the way that it does with models, okay? So let's take a look at the counter model for this. All right, so let's take a look at our, I call it the kindergarten example, but I don't think you actually learned this until like 3rd grade. But we're just going to do 2 positives. So I'm going to do 4 times 4. Okay. Well, the way we read multiplication is we read this as 4 groups of 4. So when we actually are using counters for this, it's just 1 group of 4, 2 groups, and so on until we get to 4 groups. Okay? That's not brand new information. I'm sure you guys did this in 3rd grade. You probably had like little manipulatives or something that you put in little groups and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. So we can say that 4 groups of 4 is 16. Thank you. Awesome. So let's get some negatives involved in this. Let's start with just 1 negative first. Let's go ahead and do 4 groups of -4. Okay. So 4 groups of -4 will look just like this one, except for instead of 4 groups of positives, it will be 4 groups of negatives. So really, we're just doing 4 groups that look like this. Okay, so there's 1 group of -4, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Now all together, that is how many negatives?
-16.
Fabulous. Okay, -16. Everyone good? Okay, now let's look at the case when you have a negative times a negative. Let's use the same numbers, okay? We're going to do -4 times -4 this time. Now remember that negative really means the opposite. Okay, so when I read this problem, I'm thinking the opposite of 4 groups of -4. Well, this was 4 groups of -4. The opposite of this would be this, right? Yep. Yeah, the opposite of negative groups is positive groups. So we have the opposite of 4 groups of -4, which will be 4 groups of +4 then. Alright. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. And we already know the answer to this because it's the same model as above. So this would be +16. Okay, +16. So really when you have 2 negatives, it's the opposite of the opposite, so it's positive. Okay, if you think of it that way. Okay, I'm going to have you guys model just a couple here. -3 times -5. -3 times +5. I didn't do any positive times positive examples because I think you all are good on that. Bless you. The opposite of 3 groups of -5 would be 3 groups of +5. One, two, three. So we get a +15 here. Next one, the opposite of 3 groups of +5 would be 3 groups of -5. Or you could have just switched the order, that works too. Yeah, so if you did 5 groups of -3, that's totally fine. Or you can do the opposite of 3 groups of +5 and do -5. Okay. So this is -15. We have 7 groups of -1. Altogether, 7 negatives. The opposite of 7 groups of -1 would be 7 groups of +1. Okay. So far, so good? All right, if you have room, that's fine, but if you don't have room, flip your page over because we're going to talk about the rules so that we can move on. Okay, so our first case that we're going to look at is a positive times a positive. When you multiply a positive times a positive, the answer is always
Positive.
awesome. Hey, kiddo. A Reese's?
Like, I have no idea what she said.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like a Reese's. She said Reese's, like, books.
Here, I'll call her and find out. Tell her I'll call her in just a second.
Or if you want, I can just ask her again.
Yeah, maybe just try to ask her again and see what she says. Okay, the next one is when we have a positive times a negative, what is your answer going to be?
Negative.
Ooh, yes, okay. And then a negative times a positive will be what?
Negative.
Yep. So basically, if the signs are different, like one's negative and one's positive, your answer will be negative. If they're the same, the answer is, yeah, because a negative times a negative will be a positive. I'm going to put a little box around it, make it look nice. I want to show you one more thing real quick, and that's my integer triangle, and it looks like this. It's like a great little key for you to remember what the sign will be when you multiply two integers together. Oh, receipt book, yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. I do have a receipt book. Just make sure I don't have anything in here hiding. All right, so what happens is if you multiply a negative times a negative, you cover up a negative and a negative, and your answer is positive. Okay, and then if you multiply a negative times a positive, you just cover up a negative and a positive, and what's left? Your answer is negative. Okay, so that's a little tool if you get confused and you just like, and sometimes brains just get fatigued, you're tired, you can't quite remember, just do a triangle and cover it up and see what your answer is. All right? So let me show you the table of contents. I'm going to give you 7 minutes to get started on your homework, and then we're going to work on your projects.